Welcome to Week, the political roundtable from the Commonwealth Club of California from Monday, May 15th, 2017. Boy, what will we talk about today? What do you think? Now, actually, last week, President Trump criticized comedian Stephen Colbert, who had made a sexual reference about the president in a joke. Colbert responded to the criticism by saying, quote, "I do occasionally use adult language, and I do it in public, instead of in the privacy of an Access Hollywood van." Well, I'm John Zipper. I'm your host for Week. I'm the Commonwealth Club's Vice President of Media and Editorial. I'm honored to be here with you and our great panel. Today we're, of course, going to talk about today's jaw-dropping news about the president being accused of having given highly classified information to the Russians. Along with the latest on the FBI director's firing, the Obamacare repeal, Hillary Clinton's new move, plus some local and state news. So we'll get into all of that, and of course we'll end the evening with our usual news quiz. I always like to say that the Commonwealth Club represents people with a wide variety of views, so anything you hear up here is the opinion only of the person speaking and not of the course of the Commonwealth Club. Now let's meet our panelists for today. I'm going to start on the far end of the stage with Carla Marinucci. She's the senior writer for Politico's California Playbook, Politico.com, and she's on Twitter at @CMarinucci. Next to her is Dan Bornstein. He's a columnist and editorial writer at the East Bay Times and the Bay Area News Group. He's on Twitter at BornsteinDan. Next to me is Bob Butler. He's a reporter for KCBS Radio, and he's on Twitter at BobButler7, which means there are 6 other Bob Butlers out there who weren't good enough to be here.
I was just late, I guess.
Well, listen, there are question cards throughout the room. I think most of you know how we do that. Write down some questions, and they'll be collected and brought to me, and I will ask as many as I can during our hour here. So let's start with this just in. Today, the Washington Post reported that Donald Trump shared, quote, highly classified, unquote, information with a Russian ambassador and foreign minister last week. Carla, what do we know so far?
I think it says it all. A tweet I just read before we came. Senator Feinstein was emerging from the congressional subway there. She was mobbed by reporters, and she said, "Oh my God, what's happened now?" it's like, that says it all. I mean, it's, oh my gosh. This bombshell by the Washington Post just a couple of hours ago about President Trump essentially bragging to the Russian foreign minister that, well, his intel is so great, and he talked about an ISIS plot. And this was information not that we had gotten, but from one of our allies, one of our key allies. The Washington Post is not revealing who that ally is, but he had very specific information in which he talked about the city in which this information was found, making it very easy for the Russians to figure out who gave it to our ally. This is causing an amazing, it is absolutely roiling Washington because why? Well, I mean, it's an ally's information closely guarded. What does it do to our relationships? What does it do to the trust that the intelligence community has in Trump? I think it was interesting that General McMaster came out just a short while ago, gave a short press conference, and basically said that the president didn't pass along any sources or methods to the Russians, but that it's significant that the Washington Post story doesn't say that. He also took no questions from the media and turned around and went back inside. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders also told reporters, all of them convening at the White House, we're not answering any more questions tonight. So I think this is interesting because why? Well, Donald Trump, so many Republicans, including Paul Ryan, criticized Hillary Clinton during the presidential campaign, saying somebody who couldn't control or couldn't handle classified information, didn't deserve to be president. And Donald Trump himself tweeted that this would be illegal for anyone else to hand over or to disseminate classified information to the Russians. Because he's the president, he can determine what information to give out and what not. But the fact is, what does it do to our allies, to our trust, to our sources, does it have implications in terms of actual lives being at stake, who may have given this information to our allies? So this is just the beginning of the story. You know, we thought we were going to be discussing Comey being fired too, and that's another whole, but here's where we're at.
Yeah.
Another blow up.
This is what happens when you don't want to be bothered with the details and the hard stuff of being president. You know what I mean? You know, when you just need it all reduced to a couple of talking points, and then you don't want to even read those. You know, it's the Washington Post story. It sort of said it all to me when that little section in there about how he wants to, they would prepare detailed briefings for him, and he wanted to boil down to one page with bullet points, and then he didn't even bother to read those. It's wow. The world's who knew? The world's a complicated place. You know, I mean, who knew?
Yeah, just like healthcare.
Yeah.
I will say that in some respects you might call this a train wreck. I'm going to give you guys a hip hop term. It's a hot mess.
3 cards are ready from the audience, and they're all kind of along the same lines. I'll just read all 3 of them. One says, will Trump be impeached? Another says, who can arrest the President of the United States? On first day, President Pence will pardon his predecessor. Another person, what do you think it will take to get congressional Republicans to help the Democrats to ditch Trump? So what's their resistance?
I think that is really the significant question right now. We saw today House Member Tom McClintock, who's one of the most conservative guys in the California delegation, call for a special prosecutor, which is like, wow, really?
Specifically on the Russia stuff.
On the Russia stuff, on the Russia stuff with Comey, right. We've seen Darrell Issa also call for it. So they're starting to do that. I think it's been said that I think the Republicans we're going to stick with him, or will stick with him, as long as they think he can deliver on the things that they want, which is judicial appointments, tax reform, regulatory reform. But right now, you know, his legislative agenda is just stopped cold. There's nothing happening there. At some point, these headlines and the polls plummeting, you know, most Republicans are still with him, but the fact is that with these kind of headlines, they're looking at 2018, a lot of them, particularly in California, and saying, you know, how much do we want to hang with him when, you know, we could be the ones to go down. I think that this is a huge,
If you think about this, the pace at which, I feel like we're in the height of a presidential campaign, in terms of the pace at which the news stuff is just churning out day after day. You know, we were going to discuss Comey today. It suddenly became.
We still will, I'm sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
But it's already become old news almost. You know, this I hate to say it, but this is equally, if not more serious. You know, the Comey situation raises all sorts of serious issues, no question about it. But each one of these crises just raises stakes and the importance of it. It's somewhat mind-boggling how fast this is coming out. And so coming to the questions they ask, you know, impeached, I don't know. You know, are the Republicans going to impeach their own president? You know, are they going to distance themselves? Yeah. And no question, especially those who have election battles coming up, you know,
which is what, no surprise, McClintock and Issa would call for.
Right, exactly. You know, I mean, but they're at some point, yeah, they're going to have to start politically distancing themselves, and we're seeing signs of that already, which is pretty phenomenal when you consider this is May. He's been in January, February, March, 4 months.
right.
You know, I mean, who would have thought it? He's got a majority in both houses, and he is in the process. I mean, how anyone could just so blow this opportunity that he had for his agenda, and he had a tremendous opportunity to forward, you know, for better or worse, his agenda. And you know, I do think, for example, that somehow or another we'll get something that the Republicans will squeeze together on health care, because they're not going to they're not going to want to come to the end of this session and not have something to show on healthcare. What it is, I don't know. How bad it will be, I don't know. But they'll have something, and he'll sign it and declare victory. The rest of it, I don't know where he goes.
And I think that's why the Republicans are in a really tough spot, because if they do repeal the ACA, which they're really trying to do now, and come up with something that they say is better, but everybody else thinks is worse, they're going to be in a really tough spot. Because especially when their voters start losing health care. You don't forget, it wasn't too long ago, well, 8 years ago, where I remember I covered a Pete Stark town hall meeting where people were screaming about this whole health care law and hands off my Medicare. I don't want government-run health care. But people were just irrational about it. And now some of those same people, when they realized it wasn't what it was said to be, are now doing the same thing about getting rid of their health care. So I think it's really ironic if indeed they lose their health care. That could be a really bad situation for the GHP in 2018.
And I know we're going to talk about sort of the details of the health care bill in a few minutes, and I want to get into that. But I just want to, on the impeachment issue, and on another issue. I mean, for the first time, really, I'm talking to people who are well-respected. People have been watching Washington for a long time, and they're talking about the possibility of the 25th Amendment being invoked.
Which is, explain that.
Which is when the president is unable to serve or incapacitated in some respects. I was on a panel with Bruce Kane, who's a well-respected Stanford political scientist last week, who said this is now becoming a topic of discussion, that the president is throwing out so many tweets and making so many statements that seem sort of disjointed or
But Carla, explain how the 25th Amendment gets invoked.
It has only been invoked in the case of Ronald Reagan when during the assassination attempt, the cabinet invoked the 25th Amendment and declared George Bush Sr. acting president for the time in which Reagan was incapacitated. And the president can come back and say, no, I want the job back. But Bruce was saying that there are now, people are openly sort of discussing this in Washington, whether Trump, if you compare some of the speeches he's made 20 years ago and the talk and interviews he's done 20 years ago, he's seen much more sort of rational, to be honest, to compare to that either he's under a lot of stress or not sleeping, or maybe this job is just too much for him. Some people are actually discussing this in Washington. I find that really
but Carly,
interesting.
does any of this surprise you? In this, I mean, look at I admit I just said how amazing some of this stuff is, but on the other hand, given what we knew about Donald Trump during the election, does any of this really surprise you?
No, because he is a CEO of a company in which his word is law. That's different than Washington. That's different than governing, because in governing, you have to have people to go with you. It's the old adage, if you want to walk fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with people. He's not used to doing that. And so that's why there are very few people he can talk to. And it's why I'm not at all surprised that we're at this point. And don't get caught up in this whole thing about it's the media's fault and the media's treating him, with such disrespect and treating him so poorly. It's nothing to do with that. We're asking questions. We're being told we can't ask questions. That's not how it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would say don't get caught up in the whole, notion that there may be an impeachment or the 25th Amendment may. I think the chances of either of those happening
are still small.
Are very, very, very
Although
small.
I have to say with the developments last week, in which he himself gave an interview to Lester Holt, indicating that he called in Comey for a dinner after he knew about the investigation, where the reports are that he asked him for a loyalty oath. Afterwards, tweeting, he better know what he's saying because there may be tapes. That to many appeared like intimidation of a possible witness. Whether there's, and the questions have been raised about possible obstruction of justice in some of these. We still don't know where this whole Russia inquiry is going. We know the FBI is looking into it, and The next director of the FBI, I think, is going to have this charge to be aggressive about it, or will face a lot of heat.
Charged from whom?
Well, I mean, he's going to have a responsibility, and I think that this is going to be something.
But wait a minute.
Yeah.
Who's hiring him?
Yeah, well,
you know,
that's
I mean, let's remember this.
Yeah.
You know, this is not somebody being hired by the congressional Democrats. This guy's being
Jeff
or
Sessions.
woman. This is Jeff Sessions hiring him, right? I mean, Jeff Sessions, who, by the way, was supposed to recuse himself on everything Russia. Right?
Yeah, but it was the emails. It wasn't Russia.
Yeah, but
wait a minute.
But I guess what I'm saying in all this is, and maybe I always, to me, this all still comes down to the ultimate power play. These things are truly eye-opening. These things are truly amazing to watch. But none of this yet raises to the level. We don't have evidence that raises to the level that the Republicans are going to turn around and admit they need to get rid of their president, because especially after all of them rallied behind him. And now maybe the congressional inquiry will somehow dig up enough stuff that will push it to that level. It will push it to sort of, just as the Watergate congressional hearings did. But I just think but that would require the congressional Republicans to be willing to do that.
I agree.
And the only place that might happen is in the Senate.
There's one caveat here. Okay, we're talking about the congressional investigation, Senate investigation. There's still an FBI investigation going on.
Exactly.
And we don't know what the FBI has, despite all you've heard about. They found no collusion, they found no this, they found no that. The FBI does not tell you what it has until it's ready to either indict or just totally dismiss or just close the investigation. So you ask what it'll take to impeach the president. I think if, and they've been surveilling a lot of these Russians, if they have audio of the president basically saying, listen, don't release those WikiLeaks things yet, do it next week, that's enough right there for impeachment. Because don't forget, it wasn't until they didn't hear Richard Nixon for 18 minutes or 16 minutes that the Republicans came around and said, okay.
But do we think that in this administration, the FBI and, especially with a new head hired by Jeff Sessions, that the FBI is going to be able to conduct itself the way it traditionally has been able to conduct itself?
I think that it's one thing to get rid of James Comey, but you have an entire agency, and many of them have taken it very personally, the way their director was fired. Out in L.A. doing a seminar for the FBI, when it comes out it just showed no respect for the director at all. And as much as some of the questions about how he released the information about Hillary, and there were a lot of people disagreed with him on that. The consensus is he was highly respected within the agency,
right,
and they're not taking it well the way he was taken out. So I think the FBI will go on, and the FBI will produce an investigation. And you've got, by the way, some Californians involved in this whole thing, which I think are significant. On the House side, Adam Schiff of Burbank has just been relentless on this thing, as has Eric Swalwell of the East Bay, and Jackie Spear, all three on the Intelligence Committee, and all of them pushing really hard for this independent investigation. And now you're starting to see, when you see a Tom McClintock suggesting a special prosecutor, that's significant, I think. It could suggest maybe the wall's going to crumble there.
Let's stay on this, on kind of some of the congressional members of both parties' responses to specifically Comey, I guess, but also just kind of the ongoing turmoil. California's two Democratic senators, Kamala Harris and Dianne Feinstein, both had kind of different responses to the Comey firing. What was that? Just difference in temperament, or is that?
I think that's
Kamala
a question
Harris
of temperament and
experience.
Kamala Harris right away came out with outrage and was very strong on Twitter and so forth. Feinstein was a little bit in the first 24 hours was a little more like let's make sure we have somebody who's independent who could look into this. But she's been very strong about it since. And I think both of California's senators have been really tough and in terms of saying, we are going to get to the bottom of this. Let us know what resources you need. We're told the acting director of the FBI that.
And Feinstein's response was very Feinstein-esque, if you will. She is somebody
It's
who's...
called Feinsteinian.
Pardon?
Feinsteinian.
Feinsteinian, okay. Feinsteinian. Forgive me, my grammar's so bad. She's always been somebody who is not quick to just jump in the fray.
Yeah.
She's always been someone to pause, wait a beat. Let's see. Let me make sure I've got it all down right. Let's see what we got here. And frankly, the other part of that, to her credit, is that by taking that pause, by waiting a second, she's not just another one in the mix. There was such a flurry of instant reaction. And, with the Comey thing, we've got to remember, this was a double-edged sword. Remember, this is the same guy who the Democrats wanted to get rid of just a few months ago. Okay, now that doesn't negate the horrible timing and the implications of what the president did, but this was a you had to walk a very fine line politically on this.
Yeah.
I mean, even you looked at the New York Times editorial even on this.
Yeah.
They basically said, look, he needed to go, so it wasn't a question of Comey. It was a question of how it happened almost.
Right.
And so I understand why someone like Feinstein would want to just take a pause and figure out how you're going to politically and intellectually thread this needle.
Yeah.
Because frankly, it was kind of odd to hear some of the people who were loudly protesting Comey's firing suddenly, who were some of the same people who were calling for him to be fired a few months ago. I mean, the context, yes, it really matters, but you've got to be able to address that when you protest the firing in that. You can't just ignore it. And too many of the statements I saw coming out from members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress, seem to have forgotten what they had just said a few months ago. Now, and so I understand.
I also think from the media point of view, some of the interesting stuff with relation to this whole Comey and Russia inquiry has been the treatment of the news media on this and how, why we're not seeing more protests from Republicans and others. For instance, last week, the meeting with the Russians in the Oval Office, American media were excluded from that meeting, and the only media allowed was Russian state media. They're the ones who released the photos from that.
It was the official photographer.
The official photographer from the Russian state media.
So if there's any doubt,
yeah.
Russia is now the official White House photographer.
And it's like absolutely unprecedented. I've never seen anything like that in my lifetime. Why there was no more protests from Capitol Hill on that? That blows my mind that was allowed to go through like that.
Bob?
So I don't know whether there was collusion between Trump campaign people and the Russians when it came to releasing emails and the timing and everything else for the election. I don't know. I wasn't there. I didn't hear it. And you would think that if there was nothing there, that you would want to get to the bottom of it very quickly and you wouldn't put all these roadblocks in the way. That to me is the biggest problem, is that even if it comes out that there's nothing there, you set yourself to look so poor by doing it this way, by putting all these roadblocks up and keep saying it's fake news. And we were talking about this in the green room. You're even telling us what questions we should be asking. We shouldn't be asking about that. You say, I've answered the question 100 times. No, you've been asked the question 100 times. You haven't answered it yet. And that's what happens during these press briefings. So it really is a problem, but I think in the end, if we get a special prosecutor, my only concern is that the special prosecutor has to work with the FBI agents who will report to the director appointed by the guy under investigation. There's a problem there. There's a reason why in the last days of the Obama administration, all this information about this so-called Russia involvement in the election wasn't just left and handed over to the people that replaced them. Because the fear was, if we just leave this here for them, it'll be deleted. We'll lose it. So that's why it was distributed to all these other agencies. And you can cry about it if you want, but it was the right thing to do.
Bit of a back step here to, I guess, the talks about impeachment or in other ways of removing the president. 4 different questions, all kind of say the same thing from the audience. I'm just going to merge them into one, which is, if the Republicans, as has been stated in Congress, are not willing to turn on the president until they get their big wish list through into law, wouldn't they actually be even better off if they were dealing with a President Pence?
Yes. They would.
Yes.
There could be a breaking point.
Yes.
Yeah, but the problem, the problem is not, in my mind, them getting their agenda through. It's the public relations and political fallout, because most of these people were clamoring for Trump during the fall. Once he became the nominee, these were the people who were lining up behind him, and so that's the political fallout that they risk, I think.
Yeah.
Far more.
I've been
than-
to a number of these town hall
Yeah.
meetings. People are very, very angry at them. We've seen a bunch of them in Southern California. There's actually empty chair town hall meetings where hundreds of people show up because representatives like Mimi Walters, she's a good example, just not having town hall meetings. Very, very, very vulnerable. Jeff Denham is another one. There's 7 of them here in California who could make or break what happens to flipping the House in 2018.
Pence may have been the most brilliant move that Trump made, if you think about it, because the one thing some fear more than Trump is Pence. And so,
Well, specifically liberals, for liberal ideas and the liberal agenda, you don't like Trump because he's a bully, he's all these things that you hate, but Pence is smart, and Pence can work. He can work with members of Congress to get his agenda passed. Whereas Trump wants to go ahead and do it on his own, why he's not getting anywhere. But Pence will be a team player, more or less, and that could be even more devastating if you believe in liberal causes.
Let me play devil's advocate here. Is the president ill-served by the people he has put into office with him? In other words, all that senior staff, all the White House team really is there to make sure the president knows, oh, you can't do this.
You're there to say yes.
Yeah.
He's put a bunch of yes people in position, people that aren't going to buck him. And the few people that have been willing to say anything, like filling the NSA position, the 2 people that he wanted to do it said no, because they were going to be their own, they had a mind of their own. So I think, is he being ill-served by them? Yes, but that's the way he wanted it. He don't want people in there that are going to tell him he can't do something. He's basically, it's my way or the highway. And if you have somebody in there that's going to say, well, Mr. President, you can't do it this way.
Yeah, I agree, Bob. He's got a couple of people there, I think a lot of there who are widely respected, McMaster and Mattis, who, story today, by the way, was that the White House gave out his phone number on a sticky, yellow sticky thing in one of the photos. One of the Trump aides has his cell phone number, and of course it's out there to everybody. That's another issue, but the fact is that they're saying they're hoping the Russians don't.
It was the source.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. I can't recall. These press aides who are willing to get out there and be completely contradicted by him the next day. The interesting thing for San Francisco audience is the report in the New York Times today that probably about to take over the Sean Spicer job, or at least close to getting it.
Possibly.
is Kimberly Guilfoyle, the ex-wife of Gavin Newsom. So that could make things very interesting.
We come full circle, don't we?
We want to see the difficulties
I mean,
there.
can you imagine that?
Yeah, no, it's like
Prosecuting the dog mauling trial, being the White House press secretary.
6 degrees of separation. Yeah, it's going to create challenges for him running for governor, I would think.
Another California connection to some of this is Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
And you at Politico, you had an event with him.
That's right.
In which he was talking about the Comey firing. What was his take?
I basically said, I mean, he justified it. He basically said they serve at the pleasure of the president.
Yeah.
It's the president's role to do what he wants. I think that McCarthy, it was one of the guys who was going to whip the votes into shape for the health care bill, is still considered a power up there on Capitol Hill. But the question is whether he's now going to have to protect some of these Republicans in Southern California particularly, who are really, really vulnerable in 2018. And that's going to be his big challenge.
Okay. Well, connected to this, but on our next topic, let's talk about the House Republicans passing a repeal of the Affordable Care Act, putting forward, their program is called the American Health Care Act, I
Right.
believe?
American Health Care Act.
ACA.
Or Trump Care is maybe something.
Trump It went then, of course, to the Senate, and the Senate
It
received
hasn't
it.
gone there yet. I mean,
really?
it's going to get there,
Okay.
but
Well,
they haven't taken it up.
The Senate has received news of it coldly, I think we can say. I mean, basically, senior Senate Republicans were saying, you guys go sit back down, we'll write our own. Any sense from any of you what could get through both chambers of Congress? They don't need Democrats at all to pass this, am I correct? Or is there a...
I think they need them in the Senate.
Yeah, they do need them in the Senate.
It's 60 votes
Yeah.
in the Senate,
Is it? Okay.
so you'll have to get at least, I think, 4 or 5, or like 6 Democratic senators to vote for it. And I don't see anybody doing it in the current form the bill is now. I wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody in the Senate comes up, listen, here's the problem with the ACA. Let's just fix it and go on. But the thing about the ACA and all this thing about it imploding is that when people say that, they forget to mention, the Republicans anyway, that they're the reason it's imploding, if at all it is. In November of 2015, Marco Rubio sponsored a bill that cut the amount of money that insurance companies are going to be reimbursed. Or the way it was supposed to work is that insurance companies would sign up. They knew that they were going to lose money in the first couple of years. So in the bill, there was a reimbursement each year for about $3 billion that they would be reimbursed. And what Rubio's bill did was cut that reimbursement in 2016 from $2.9 billion to $400,000, or 400 million. So we cut it by $2.5 billion. So the insurance companies said, wait a minute, all these losses were not going to be compensated. They began pulling out of the markets. That's one thing. And then, since Trump has taken over, they haven't done anything as far as pushing the bill, advertising the ACA, getting people to sign up for it. There's been no advertising dollars. So when they say it's imploding, they have to also admit that, yeah, it's imploding because we wanted it to implode.
Well, let's
Yeah.
back up even further, if you will, to the original passage of the ACA. Remember, the whole thing was a political compromise that was jerry-rigged because single payer was not on the table politically. They wanted to keep the majority of Congress wanted to keep insurance companies as part of it.
No public option.
And but they wanted to be able to try and offer insurance to everybody. Well, you can't make that happen, remember, unless you force people in, because unless the risk pools just don't work. Okay, I mean, that's no matter how you slice and dice this debate, that's what it keeps coming back to. That was the problem back in 2009. That's the problem today. If you want it, it all comes back to how the dollars shuffle around. Meanwhile, the good part of this, if anything, is people have gotten used to having coverage without pre-existing conditions. That perhaps more than anything else, they've gotten used to everybody theoretically having access if they seek it out. And once you start taking that away, I mean, the political divide of where people said we're unhappy with the ACA, with Obamacare, half the people that were unhappy with it were because they wanted to move it further to the left. They wanted to move it to single payer, and myself among them. I mean, so it's not that they're unhappy, not that they want to move the way the Republicans want. So when the Republicans start tinkering with pre-existing conditions, or they start or their solutions start jacking up the price of health care for the elderly beyond affordable levels, you better believe there's going to be a political kickback. And members of the Senate, I think, understand this. They have to run in bigger districts. This is sort of why we have two houses, and they I think they're going to temper this in a big way.
Yeah, and they're not going to make the mistake that the House members
They're not
made.
gonna make
In terms of the House passing this with no Congressional Budget Office analysis, not even any sense of what the costs are going to be.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we know in California that 5 million people here got health coverage under the ACA. The number of uninsured went down from 17% to 7% in California. It's a big, and now there's a drive for single payer here in California. This is the issue. A lot is going to be left up to the states to determine, what kind of benefits you get. So I think Stephen Colbert joked, if Daddy wants a colonoscopy in Alabama, he better drive to California because this is going to be the problem. And who's it going to hurt? We know, rural people, poor people. When you're talking about, eliminating the federal funding for Medicare expansion, that is a huge issue. So the Republicans haven't even started to deal with it. We've already seen, as you mentioned, some Republican senators say, this is going to have to work for everyone. And I just think they've got a long road ahead of them, and they wanted to pass this. I think I heard Joe Scarborough say on Morning Joe, and I think he's right, that the House members wanted this great headline for the 100-day. They got it, and the headline is now, dissipating into the wind, and they're left holding the bag on this one. And so, whether they can actually deliver.
That was the news 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that was days. Yeah.
Comey.
It seems so old. Yeah, really, you're absolutely correct.
To your original question,
Yeah.
the Senate can come up with a bill. It's got to go back to the House, and the Senate's not going to have things in that bill. Don't forget, the Freedom Caucus is the one that wouldn't vote for it the first time, voted for it the second time because it was more draconian. So if it comes back from the Senate without it being as draconian, do they vote for it? I don't know that they will.
My prediction is they will do something. Politically, they have to do something.
Why don't they just fix the ACA?
Well, wait a minute. Realistically, if you stop and you think about it, as draconian as the House bill may seem, if you stop and think about it, it's got some bad parts of it, but basically that's what they are doing. I mean, they're tweaking the ACA, if you will. If you think about it, the underlying premises of the ACA, I think, are here to stay. And I don't think that politically anybody can totally gut and replace the ACA. I don't think that that's politically possible. But what you can do is you can tweak ACA and call it something else.
Just fix it.
Yeah. We're not. Look at the other prediction though is we're not going to fix it. Okay, we are fighting within such a narrow bandwidth that there is not the political will to do what's really needed to simplify it, and in my opinion, find a way to take the insurance companies out of it, so that you can really provide meaningful health care in a way that people understand.
To everyone.
And for everybody. That's not going to happen, unfortunately, not with this Congress and not in the foreseeable future. But on the other hand, we have established certain things that if you start tinkering with them now, it will be political suicide.
Yeah.
It may be either way come 2018.
It may be, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they may have already started to
Yeah.
dig their graves, yeah, on this. Yeah. No pun intended.
So Hillary Clinton, you remember her? You've heard of her? She ran for president, Secretary of State. She has, I think today, officially launched
Yes, she did,
a new organization called, what is it, Onward Together, which is going to be raising money for and distributing it to various groups who are opposed to the Trump agenda. What do you think of that? Start with you, Bob. I mean, is this the right way for her to get back into the mix of things?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, she's such a lightning rod now, whether you think it's unfair or not, because of the whole situation with the election and the emails. And, you know, while the email story was such a bad story for her, you really can't blame people for pointing it out because she did do it. And that was her fault. And she can blame nobody but herself. But she is probably the most notable and the most qualified Democrat out there right now. I've even heard that people want her to run again in 2020. I don't think that'll happen. I don't think she'd want to put herself through that. But you know, if this organization can find the next rising star, so if you will, to run, then I would say it would be okay.
Dan?
I think that the last thing the Democrats need is a Clinton-led anything. Not to in any way demean the intellect of either Clinton, but the fact of the matter is it is time for a new generation. It is time for the Democrats to search down and find somebody, and frankly not put her front and center in a way that whatever movement she creates just becomes a lightning rod. Because as smart as she is, as intellectually interesting as she wasn't a good candidate, and she will forever be a lightning rod that, as much as it would have been amazing to see the first woman president at that point, we've got to move on right now to find the next best person. Maybe it'll be a man, maybe it'll be a woman, but it has to be somebody. The Democrats have to find somebody who
expresses simply.
Pardon?
Who expresses with simple words that people can understand.
Expresses with simple words. That's true. She says expresses with simple words that people can understand. I think that was a problem. You know,
The messaging.
the
Yes, the
messaging.
messaging.
Yeah, the messaging.
Clinton was not a very good. Ironically, after Bill was supposedly the great communicator, Hillary was not. You know, for better or worse. And you know, they need somebody. They need the next. They need the next Barack
disagree with you a
Obama.
little bit on that in the sense of, you know, she did get 66 million votes. She did get 4.2 million votes more than him, I think, in California alone. And it was, you know, it was a question of, say, whatever, 70,000 votes in specific places.
78,000, yeah.
So she didn't, you know, she didn't totally fall down a job. I agree with you, the potential of her being a lightning rod for the Republicans and energizing the Republicans. On the other hand, somebody who has, I've seen her now since the election. In fact, here in San Francisco, she gave a speech not long ago where she sort of unveiled the bumper sticker, if you will, for this new group, which is resist, insist, persist, enlist. That is, Democrats need to do, you know, a couple of specific things. So anybody who gets 66 million votes can raise money. And if that's what she's trying to do, and this is for groups like Indivisible, which is have brought out a ton of people to those town hall meetings, or Swing Left, which is a group that is trying to target 35 different House districts. If she does that, and she's got Howard Dean on board, I agree with you that the Democrats do need to raise a bench and highlight some of these younger House members and other people who are coming up. Kamala Harris, a lot of people talk about her as well. But the fact is that she could have a role here. When I saw her at this women's conference not long ago in San Francisco, she had a couple of thousand women there. They loved her. She does turn out people. She does articulate a message. You're right. There are maybe not. She didn't do it well to those Rust Belt voters out there, and ignored a lot of people in states that mattered. So the strategy of the campaign was a question, and other things. But fundraising for the things that Democrats want, maybe nobody has a fundraising list.
Carla,
that's
I
better
would
than
argue
Hillary
that in
Clinton.
California, had the Republicans put up a more normal, smart, charismatic candidate, she might have squeaked by. But I guess what I'm saying is, yes, she did get the plurality of the votes, okay? Absolutely, no question about that. But as we talked about here, like the week before the election, right?
But she still lost to Donald
Which
Trump.
she still lost to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, in California, she was regarded by many, many as the better of two bad alternatives. Now, I get it that she still has a strong following. And I'm not saying that she should disappear, but if she becomes the head of a movement, the Democrats are in trouble. I don't doubt that, if she goes behind the scenes and does what she's always been good at, and the Clintons have always been post-President Bill good at, that is working behind the scenes, building networks, raising money, fine. But if she becomes the head of the movement,
the face.
the face of the
If the
movement,
Democrats can't come
they
up with
are
other
screwed.
people to articulate what they stand for.
So the
yeah.
question is, who is there on the bench that needs to step up? I've heard people say Adam Schiff. I've heard Kamala Harris. I think it's too early for her, but then I said the same thing about Obama. But I mean, who's out there?
Kamala Harris, some folks are saying she's laying the groundwork or doing the things.
There was a
that one
story
does.
this week about that. McClatchy wrote about that, how she's talking to the right reporters in Washington. She's going to doing the right interviews and so forth. She's expanding her agenda. I still think it is very early for her, but you're right, Bob. I mean, Obama we looked at early too. I mean, Adam Schiff has just catapulted himself into the national discussion, I think. Although it's very hard for a congressman to make that play for the White House, but he's clearly ambitious to move up. I've talked to him about that. And I think he's somebody who has put himself out there on social media in a very effective way. There's other U.S. senators out there. People talk about Al Franken. I've heard a discussion. A lot of people like him. They think he's super effective. He's obviously very smart. There's a number of names out there. Mark Warner, another one. I think Democrats, we may not have heard yet.
Someone
that
just
person
passed in
Well,
a.
I want to point out something to you, Carla, because you deserve great credit in a certain sense. I remember very distinctly you coming back and us talking about this, I think, after the 2004 convention. And you were wowed by Obama's speech.
Yeah,
And
that's right,
you said it then, this guy is going, he look for him to run. He had something that few politicians, that comes along once
Yeah.
in a few generations. I mean, he was a special candidate. I would argue, in hindsight, he will be looked back at as one of the truly great presidents in a very difficult time, who was truly presidential. And so I guess I kind of wince a little bit when every first-term senator is sort of floated out there as, oh, they may run, and be the next Obama. And my first reaction is, I haven't seen it yet. That was a
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was
I
a
haven't
moment in
seen-
time. Yeah,
that
yeah.
was a moment in time and
Yeah.
a special person, and I don't see that in Kamala Harris. I've yet to see who that person is.
Yeah.
We've got some more suggestions from the audience. Al Franken is mentioned. Tammy Duckworth, Barbara Lee.
Barbara Lee would never, no.
Barbara Lee.
Barbara
on to
Lee
or
is
you
really
don't?
interesting because somebody was doing analytics and saying she is one of the most active in Congress on social media and has very much upped her profile. Whether it would be, some people have suggested, and last time I saw Dianne Feinstein here at a town hall meeting, there were signs in the audience that said Barbara Lee for Senate, U.S. Senate, which Senator Feinstein didn't take those very well. I can tell you that.
I find it. I do not see Barbara Lee as a presidential candidate with any prospect of winning
But
the
she's
Rust
certainly
Belt.
got followers on the progressive side.
So Barbara Lee, they will hang that vote to not go into Afghanistan around her neck for the entire campaign. That's something that the Republicans, that's red meat for the Republicans. Kamala Harris, the baggage she has is not going for the death penalty here in San Francisco for the guy that killed the police officer whose name I can't remember. But the police POA was virulently opposed to her because of that. You know, she had good reason because she couldn't have got a conviction in San Francisco for a death penalty case, but that's something that will come back to.
Okay. Let's stay in California and let's talk budgets, the most exciting, sexy topic you can think of. Governor Jerry Brown has, he's updated his proposal from January. Carlo, what do we know? What is he talking about? That's,
Well, it's always interesting to watch Jerry Brown talk about budgets because no matter how good the news is, and revenues were up, the shortfall's way down. The message from Jerry Brown is always like right out of Game of Thrones: "Winter is coming."
He literally quotes, "Cuts are coming over the next few years."
Keep trending down, and that's what he did again this week in Sacramento. But we're seeing some interesting. Things out of Jerry Brown. One, he has really upped the spending for the Department of Justice, Javier Becerra. I think they're upping the number of investigators there by 31, I think the number was. They have already, Becerra's office has already spent 11,000 hours, on legal issues working against Trump. And it's been interesting because California has been the front lines. We just see this week a case in San Rafael of a father of three, no criminal record, worked on a military base as a construction worker and has done so for a long time. And he was essentially taken away by ICE as he showed up for work. And he's in a detention center, and the family's devastated. There's a protest tonight, I think, in San Rafael over that. Those kind of cases, we interviewed Javier Becerra last week, said he is really going to push back on Trump on that, on environment, and this is where Jerry Brown and the budget, some of the budget stuff is kind of interesting. When it comes to climate change, when it comes to pushing back on immigration, on the wall issue, this is where Jerry Brown's going to put some of his money and his clout. And I think watching him is interesting because, of course, there's a lot of pressure up there among all the Democrats, the supermajority, to spend more money. And Jerry Brown is like, no, we're going to hold the line, and he keeps to that. It's going to be interesting to watch whether he can. With the gas tax and everything, infrastructure and other issues, there's a lot of pressure to spend.
It's all relative. I hate to say
Meaning
it,
what, Dan?
but I think when it comes to Jerry Brown and the budget, it's all relative. He looks like a tough fiscal conservative, so to speak, only relative to the Democrats he has there. He's absolutely right that he has to be prepared because winter is coming. We are so overdue for a recession; it's not even funny. And he is, one of the things that he keeps talking about that he has yet to spend any real political capital on is he's still done nothing to really restructure our tax system so that we're less vulnerable to an economic downturn. This state's budget it continues. Each recession, he is so right. He gives great credit for setting up the rainy day fund, for reining in some of this, and for that he deserves great credit.
And Dan, something you've been writing about for a long time is pension reform and how this is going to, the fact that this is another issue that's hanging out there.
Yeah,
That many of the cities are facing huge liabilities.
Look,
for.
I won't use pension and reform in the same sentence as Jerry Brown, okay? Because what he did was not pension reform. It was tweaking on the margins. And the reality of it is we're seeing it now. We're seeing it because you remember it's been 5 years. It'll be 5 years this summer since his reform was passed, and things have only gotten worse.
Didn't we just have a BART worker last week at $485,000 a year? Was that in BART?
Yeah,
janitor?
yeah. I mean, there's always these
Yeah,
great
yeah,
examples.
yeah.
Look, there's two parts of the pension thing. You can always find these exorbitant, outrageous pensions and so forth, and people, and the spiking that wasn't so much with CalPERS, but
Yeah.
the local counties. But the other thing is the underlying numbers still don't work. We're still going deeper and deeper in debt. The unfunded liabilities have
hasn't
actually
really dealt with that
gotten
yourself.
worse under Jerry Brown than when he took office. Ask any local government as they're facing what's around the corner, whether they feel like, because every local government leader knows that their pension costs are about to get worse. And why? Because we have put off this day of reckoning, so the debt, so we've underfunded the system for so many years that now we have to pay more and more to make up for it. And Jerry Brown has been unwilling to address the core structural problems with the system. That is not to say do away with public employee pensions. It is to say you have to, for existing employees, bring some reality to it. And Jerry Brown has not been willing to touch that third rail. In his budget, though, okay, there is this interesting little sleight of hand with paying down some pension debt, which I'm still analyzing it, but my first take on it is it's a gamble what he's doing. He won't call it that, but it's probably not a bad bet to place. But it's the same sort of bet that many local governments placed on their pension debts, Oakland being one of the greatest examples of it, and lost miserably and actually went deeper in debt because of it. Mm-hmm. I think his numbers are probably safer, and it's complicated how this works, and I won't take the time. Yeah. I'll spare you explaining it.
Yeah.
But suffice to say, what he's essentially doing is he's borrowing now at a cheaper rate to pay down pension debt. But when you look at the way it works, it could be a good thing. It's not going to address, it's a tiny little piece of the puzzle, but of the pension puzzle, but he wants to tout it as a huge thing. It ain't.
Yeah.
And it does come with risk, something he never mentioned.
I just want to say this quickly. You're going to move on this list. But Dan's reporting on this whole pension issue for years has been, you've been the sole voice out there crying, and I have to say, so I am so proud to know you because he's part of the team that won the Pulitzer Prize this last month for the Ghost Ship reporting. And his reporting has been great for years, so kudos to you.
And I gotta say, it was a team that I only had a small part on, but there was some people who were just phenomenal.
Well, this is why local reporting matters, so thank you.
That's true.
He deserves huge credit.
Thanks, Mark.
One other bit of local reporting, and also on Governor Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown has, of course, signed some strong gun control measures. Bob, you've been reporting on an effort to try to reverse some of those through ballot measures.
Yeah, there was an organization, they call themselves like Gunmageddon, that has sued to stop Prop 63 from going, it's already gone into effect. And they were trying to collect signatures to put something on the ballot for November. They failed but now they are wanting to sue to overturn 63. This is the one that says you can't have, which is, to me is kind of stupid, you can't have a bullet button. You know, these big guns, when you want to release the magazine, you press the button. You have to have some kind of a special tool. I think that's stupid. But they also want background checks to buy ammunition and things like that. So this group is, I'm not sure how successful they will be, but they are serious. I mean, you know, the gun lobby is very strong, and whether or not they'll win in court, I don't know. But that's what's happening with that group.
Likelihood of them, because they have got a very short time to get.
Well, no, this is not another initiative. This is they're suing.
Oh, okay.
They're suing to try to overturn it in court, and like I said, I don't know how that they'll prevail.
But I thought there was an actual effort to try to.
There was an effort last year. They had like a week or like a month to collect 500,000 signatures. They came up well short, so they couldn't get anything on the ballot. They was going to have a competing initiative on the ballot in November, but they couldn't collect enough signatures to do that.
Listen, we'll be back in a couple of weeks with more news quiz questions and, of course, lots more to discuss. On Monday, June 5th, right here in San Francisco. You can find our week-to-week news quiz every week on the Huffington Post. Thank you to our great panel today, Daniel Borenstein, Carla Marinucci, and Bob Butler. Thanks to all of you and everyone watching and listening online. Have a great week.